Awesome. Now, we've done a prior interview before. Before we get into the main topic, these are changing times. I mean, things are happening constantly. And one thing I like about your channel is you basically tell people, hey, breathe, learn how to relax. You know, because that's an issue of mine, is my mind is always racing. And so I listen to a lot of ASMR. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
So in times where people are experiencing a lot of anxiety, stress, and even depression, what do you recommend for somebody who has like lots going on in their minds? Obviously with these times, it's not unfair to,
Good. First, you mentioned my channel,
Yeah.
and that's just the Ike Okeanian channel. You're also going to post that in there as well.
Yeah.
So basically, I like to talk about mastery of subjective consciousness, right? Which basically means being comfortable with the internal environment, which is also a route to being comfortable with the external environment. Now, this has measurable effects. Not only the intrinsic effect of you being a happier person, right? You being more comfortable and making other people around you more comfortable as well.
Hold on, let me lean back. Okay, there we go.
But, exactly. Also, your blood pressure, cortisol, the stress hormone, those kinds of things, you want those things to not be a hindrance to you. Now, I break down the inner world into three elements: fit, feeling, image, and talk, right? So feeling is in the body, okay? You want to be aware of your body at all times. Now, I'm just skimming the surface, obviously, right? There are libraries worth of books and years worth of practice, and you have the people who go to monasteries and spend a whole lifetime meditating, right? So obviously, but feeling is about emotions, which are internal sensations, right? And then external perceptions, your five senses and so on. So that's the feeling aspect, okay?
Right.
And then images in the head and talk in the head is the world of dreams, the world of thoughts, right? You always want to be comfortable with that world. You want to know exactly what's going on. Whether you're standing in line or you're driving, you don't want the distractions. The distractions are alcohol or fidgeting on your phone or doing that kind of stuff. You always want to be like, hey, what's going on with solo TV right now? What's the feeling? What's the image? What's the talk? And you'll find that you'll become immediately acclimated and therefore comfortable and therefore relaxed, and those measurable parameters that we were talking about, the blood pressure, so on and so forth, will come down, and you just live a better, happier life.
And that's excellent, because one thing I do, like I was telling you just now, is I listen to ASMR and I try to meditate, listening to, meditation music, or just meditate by closing my eyes, right? You mentioned something though with the images that people have. I can't put it any other way, but what if you got some messed up images in your head, like, bunker bustering 10 girls at a time or something like that? I don't know. And do you stop them or do you let them play out in your head? Like, what would you recommend?
Two things. First of all, images that are in your head, some of them are controllable, right, in the sense that you can introduce them into your head, and in other words, avoid them, right, from coming into your head, right? If, I know you in your channel, you talk about the no-fap thing, right?
Right.
So if you do this where you're watching, let's say, porn or something before you go to bed, right?
Which I haven't done
in 375. Congratulations. When you close your eyes, you're gonna have these images in your head. Okay? So, point being, you can control it. But your question is, do you move into or away from certain things? I've always believed in moving towards, because it's about acclimating. There's a saying that what you resist persists, right? If you keep fighting against it, you're never gonna get past it. So if there's dark images in your head, weird stuff in your head, I'm not a clinical psychologist, and these things are a spectrum. There's an extreme end of the spectrum where you will need a diagnosis, okay? Right? But just for a regular person, you have certain thoughts in your head, or you have certain places in your psyche, or certain parts of your personality. Don't avoid them, okay? You want to become friends with every aspect of yourself. You don't want any of it to make you uncomfortable. Therefore, you will never be surprised.
Awesome. Now, one of the main things that has been going on in YouTube, as you're familiar with, has been the conversation of high value men, right? And I gotta give shout out to Kevin Samuels. He has his own fantastic YouTube channel. Yo, Kevin, what's up? I know you watching. Also, he's part of a co-host of mine on the 7 podcast or show that we have on Donovan Sharp's channel, along with the other guys there. Here's the thing, Ike. Before we even get into the schism of the high value man, because the controversy that has ensued because of Kevin really raising this talking point. I mean, it's not just on YouTube, but I've seen it also on Instagram and other social media because Kevin has gotten so big now, right? And I know this is subjective, but in your definition, well, number one, what is Kevin's definition of high value man? Do you know? Or
Perhaps I'll be hard pressed to list out all the parameters, but I know that it's about money for a certain amount of time.
Right.
And then there's a network, and then there's utility as well.
What does utility mean?
Being useful. In other words, he says you cannot be a high value loner. You need to be useful to the group. You need to be open to being used. Therefore, you have a network of people whom you also use.
The women using it a lot. They know.
Exactly. You have a network of people that you use, and a network of people that find you useful and that can use you. And if somebody comes to you and be like, hey, you know what, there's this, I need a high power lawyer for this particular thing in the construction industry, you're like, you know what, I got a guy, right? That's what the utility aspect of it has to do. So basically, I would say that the 3 ones that come to mind now is the money, the network, and utility.
Okay. Now, I know that with the high value man, it's a subjective argument, right? Or definition-wise anyway. But what's your definition of what a high value man is?
I would say that if we were just to continue from Kevin Samuels' enumeration of aspects, I tend to talk about what's implied in those aspects, right? So if those things are the icing on the cake, what is the cake there? So in order to make money for a certain amount of time, right, it involves certain virtues. Consistency, hard work, having a plan, and executing for a certain amount of time. And that's why he says for a certain amount of time. Because maybe you just lucked out one year or something like that, right? But no, you have to have a plan, executed it. You had certain hard skills that you were developing. You have certain soft skills that you brought in. You built a network. You started a business, whatever it is. And then you make it year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. He says 5 years, right?
5 years,
so,
yeah. That's correct.
I'm talking about what's implied in making money for 5 years. There's a series of virtues, which I just enumerated some of them, right? And for me, really, it's about someone who's passionate about life, right? That's because the ultimate value is life. And then there's certain virtues you pursue in order to live a good life, in order to pursue certain interests and develop certain talents, if you will, right? And these things are not easy. So for me, that's what underlies all the stuff that he says, right? When you talk about the network and the utility and so on and so forth, people want to talk about the character aspects. Well, how do you think you become useful? By being someone of ridiculous character? No. You need to have certain virtues in place. And for me, I focus on those. And at the bottom of it is a zest for life, a passion for life. That is my view of high value.
Okay. You know, and I can dig that, right? Because you basically just building upon the foundation of what Kevin has, right? And I'm not, by the way, let's make it clear, I'm not here to redefine Kevin's definition, right? I think that Kevin brought up a great conversation that instead of just talking about, you know, big booty girls or, you know, Cardi B getting divorced again for the 2nd time in a row, now we have a conversation about elevation. Even though it seems that with the conversation, they're stuck on some basics, and we'll get more into that in a moment. But one of the things that I made a stream recently talking about what is a spiritual high value man. I think that a lot of people get caught up in the money aspects, and that's where a lot of the schism comes from, because a lot of people aren't making 6 figures, right? Especially when we start talking about black men, right? But to me, the spiritual aspect is very important, and the reason I bring that up, Ike, is that we don't have a lot of men, especially in the male spaces, that I'm in regards to video content that talk about spiritual things. They talk about, and I know some people might disagree with me. I believe in God, but what I'm saying is that a lot of people, they don't even talk about what they believe in. If they believe in life after death, if they believe in a higher consciousness, if they believe in the universe of being able to manifest things. So I guess when I watch your videos, there's kind of like a spiritual underlining or message, right? Or am I wrong?
You are not wrong for using that word, characterizing it that way. And even when you ask me, what is my definition of Rabbi Emmanuel, which is like, I'm not a dictionary, I'm not into defining words, but I tend to go from what's implied by the surface attributes, right? So, and I talked about virtues, and then I went down that the ultimate value from which these virtues spring is the zest for life, so on and so forth. Therefore, and we started out actually with, this mastery of subjective consciousness thing, right? So you already see that I'm definitely about that, because it has practical elements, but also because of that peace of mind and that oneness and wholeness that you're looking for, okay? So there is a spiritual aspect to it, but the point is this, and this is why Kevin Samuel goes to the top, he goes to the icing on the cake. Right. Because if you just talk about the spiritual stuff and so on and so forth, you cannot measure it. You can't measure it. Okay. Look, there are, if you talk about like no fat, for example, okay, you have days, okay, but you're gonna have certain aspects, days that you're counting, that's a measure. Right. You're gonna have certain aspects of your life, certain things that in your character, or certain things that you actually are doing. Maybe you're working out better. Right. Maybe you're having more success because you're focused more on your business. Right. Those things are gonna rise up to the top, and they're gonna be able to be measured. Right. Right. So I think that spirituality and so on and so forth gives people an excuse a lot of times if you start from there. Okay. And also, there's this weird juxtaposition that people do, which is, if you talk about anything material, which tends to be things that rise to the surface and then can be measured, right? They want to immediately attack you about, well, what about the spirituality? That's why I always say, look, you think you got those material measures by just whatever? Yeah, some people were the children of Bill Gates or whatever, and they just got all that stuff. But that's not what we're talking about. If you see a guy, okay, he's got a haircut business. He's been in the corner of 5th and Home Street, whatever, for the past 5 years. His business is doing great. Trust me, he's a man of character. Right. You don't need to be, and he's successful. You don't need to go like, well, what about his spiritualism? How does he handle that? He has to have the character, he has to have the virtues in order to portray this value which you see, right? So, I push back on the juxtaposition between materialism and spirituality, because go ahead.
Oh, I don't mean to cut you. The only reason I bring up the spiritual side, Ike, is because it's not to oppose the financial aspect. I think that's very important. That's key. But the reason I bring up the spiritual aspect is because when you're dealing with character, for example, with virtue, with integrity, with honesty, loyalty, these things that are being lost now because we're in a society that rewards affery, censor myself.
Buffoonery.
Yeah, buffoonery. The only reason I bring that up is because you look at, and I'm not trying to deviate from the main topic, but when you look at certain people that have a lot of success, they may have the network, they may have the utility, the money. Celebrities, for example, some of them have all those things, but they're some of the most miserable people in the world.
Yes, sir. So, yeah, definitely don't be getting your cues from celebrity. If you want to, if the point you just brought, I have a couple of sentences to say or to speak on.
Yeah, go ahead.
The point of people whom you see having, in an external way, success, but they're not internally fulfilled. And I have a couple of things to say. One of them is that they may have 50 acres of land cultivated that everybody sees while everyone else has 0.5 and 1 and so on and so forth. But they probably know that they have actually 150 acres, they've only cultivated 50, and there's 100 acres that they do not have cultivated. In order to be successful, the flip side of talent is an obsession, it's a compulsion, it's almost a destructive personality trait. Okay, you see these things go hand in hand a lot, right? Highly successful people have an edge to them. Okay, and they're also compulsive. They're obsessive. They're obsessed.
Like Kanye West.
Kanye West, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs. The name goes down the line. These people are obsessed with stuff. You cannot succeed without being obsessed. Now, if you do not cultivate your talents and also develop your interest to the full capacity, this particular kind of obsessive behavior gets turned inwards and start to eat away at you. You start to develop bad habits. You develop alcoholism or gambling or women or whatever. You start to look for accolades from the external things and so on and so forth. So point is, when you see these people and they have some amount of success but they're not happy, there is a chance. There's a likelihood that the part of what you're seeing is that obsessive behavior, they're not actually cultivating it to the fullest. They've turned it to bad, self-destructive habits that is destroying them. So definitely don't take your cues from celebrities, okay? Because of the accolades that they get, there is a great temptation for them not to actually push themselves to cultivating the full 100 acres. So they cultivated 50 acres, but they have 100 acres left over, which is 100 acres worth of obsessive behavior, right? That they're not cultivating. And they're gonna flip that into bad behavior and self-destruction.
Okay, I get that. I can dig it. All right, so going back to the topic here, now that we've kind of defined what being high value is, let's get straight to the meat and potatoes. One thing, by the way, and going back to Kevin, and I'm not trying to use Kevin, but Kevin has brought up this.
Kevin's man.
He's brought up this topic, this argument. But when Kevin started to explode, and I noticed it, all of a sudden there's all this pushback. Oh, he wants black guys to wear suits, and he wants them to cut their dreads so they can get jobs, and all of this pushback. And when I look at Kevin, he's very refined. He's a gentleman, a man of taste. I'm thinking to myself, what's wrong with wearing a suit? Why is it that when we look, and by the way, Ike is black for those who are not aware, no cap.
West African, straight
You know
up.
what I'm saying? But when you look at that, why is it looked down upon? Number one, I mean, is it just in the community, or is it just a YouTube thing? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So let's do this then. There's the community, and then there's YouTube.
Yes.
Above all that is the general human psychology. And in the general human psychology aspect, I don't think you're surprised that anybody will push back on something like that, right?
Right.
This is typical human behavior, right? You're not satisfied with your particular position in the hierarchy.
Right.
And therefore you rail against the hierarchy, okay? This, in some instances, is even justified, right? Depending on the particular regime, the particular society, and so on and so forth, right? It's even justified to be like, F hierarchy, right? But hierarchy is life, and life is hierarchy. That's just the way physical systems and so on and so forth, all biological systems, and then social/psychological systems, things operate in a hierarchy. Uniformity does not exist, right? We can go on and on about that. But then, okay, so community versus YouTube. I think the YouTube aspect is just, okay, that's just human nature. The community, I think that, and it probably is a symptom of some other thing, which is, there are a lot of people who are raised by women. I think that the black community, more or less, African American community, more or less, is a matriarchy.
Single mothers.
And the idea of hierarchy is not something that women push, nor should they. It's not their thing. But amongst guys, right, we're fine with hierarchy and different hierarchies. And that's the thing too that I gotta point out. You can have a group of guys that you consider your friends and that you respect and you esteem them because you feel, and you respect the fact that they esteem you because you feel that you can respect the esteem that they put out. But you guys are slightly different. You have slightly different traits and different expertise. But you know that, when it comes to X, you defer to Solo. Solo is leading us now because it's restaurant time, right? And Solo is the man in the restaurant, right? Or when it comes to why, that guy, that's his expertise. We follow. We fall in line. It's almost like a military discipline to it, where we know to follow and we know that hierarchy is important, okay? And that hierarchy is not just given frivolously, okay? If you think about generals back in the days of lords and barons and so on and so forth, you think Napoleon and Alexander, they led from the front.
Right.
They led from the front. So picture yourself in this helicopter. You jump into a jungle from Beirut, or there's no jungles in Beirut, Vietnam, let's say, right? And it's military time, right? And there's Sergeant Slaughter. Okay, let's just call him Sergeant Slaughter. He's the man, right? Everybody knows Sergeant Slaughter is the man, okay?
Right.
Everyone there is scared, okay? But guess what? Sergeant Slaughter he goes down first.
Right.
When he goes down, you're like, I don't care. I'll go die if I can die next to Sergeant Slaughter. Right? This is a man's world, okay? As I said, it's not something that women push, nor should they. Right. So in a community where you're raised by women, I don't think that ethos is emphasized. This ethos of Sergeant Slaughter and hierarchy and so on and so forth per se.
Right.
So I think that's the pushback in the community. But also, there is another thing, which just to point out, and you could say, hey, you know what? I am Bernie Sanders. I am Noam Chomsky. I am a socialist. I am an egalitarian. I am someone who seeks to flatten things out.
Right.
And that's a legitimate argument. But I know that's not what people are doing on YouTube, because they pick and choose the hierarchies that they feel comfortable with. But what I'm just simply saying is, and I don't believe in that. Like in the question of hierarchy, in the terms of political science, political philosophy, which is what I'm talking about right now, I believe in hierarchy, okay? I'm an individualist, libertarian, capitalist type. Competition all the way, let's go rough and tumble, make yours, I make mine, so on and so forth. But there is legitimate arguments for flattening things, for socialism, for communism. I'll fight you about it tooth and nail to the death, right? But it's legitimate. So just to make room and space for that, if people are actually bucking against the trend of high value and hierarchies from that perspective, then it is legitimate. But that's not what YouTube or the community times do.
Okay, how are we doing for time?
Dom the Monko.